And we're live. What am I doing? Okay, so we're going to skip all the intros today. I did not feel like wanting to do this today. I actually called up Steven today, and I had him on the phone, and I said, you know what, I don't know if it's the devil attacking or if it's just my, thought process going down, or if it's the truth or whatever it is. But I was like, I don't really feel like I have anything good to say. And even if I did, what point is it for me to say versus someone else? Like, other people do this way better than I do. Why would I go and need to say any of this? So Steven said, you know what, you don't have anything to do, or you don't have anything planned, and you're really feeling down about this, you need to go and watch this video, and you need to watch it on your show. And so I was like, okay, well, I didn't have time for it because I got stuck in traffic jams all day. So this is a blind reaction. We're going to go and watch it for the first time. I can pop it up right here. You can actually see it's from the Proverbs Guys Ministry. So, I mean, without further ado, we can kind of just get right into it.
They all say the same thing in essence, though their words may be different. It all boils down to words, something like one I received not too long ago. I was diligent. I was faithful. I gave my best. The harder I tried, the less results I saw. My congregation was not appreciative. My prayers seemed to be in vain. I got to the place where I preached. What I preached seems like so much phoniness because it was not working in my own life and ministry. My prayers, my tears, my faith, my spiritual warfare, nothing seemed to get results. I'm going to have to quit the ministry till I figure this out. And folks, watching over the years, those I've met, those I know, and the reports I get, most of those who quit very seldom come back. They have this peeve against God. I did everything supposedly right, and things didn't turn out for me. They get this thought, first of all anger against God starts with a question, why? Why did you allow this when all I wanted to do is give myself? And things turned and things changed, and I don't understand it. God doesn't seem to answer my prayers anymore. They turn to materialism. Most of them backslide. Never preach again, and very, very seldom do they get back. This past week, someone had sent us a book, and I just sat down. I couldn't put it down. I read the whole book through, and I read fast. In 2 hours, I just finished the book. It's a missionary story about Aggie. The name of the book is Aggie. And if you'll pardon me, I would like to go into some detail about Aggie's story, because it illustrates what I'm trying to talk to you about, the anger of God that so many Christians have in their hearts now. This is an amazing story that just gripped my heart. In 1921, there were two couples in a famous church in Stockholm, at the Philadelphia Pentecostal Church in Stockholm. I preached there years ago. And it was a great missionary church, and they sent out young couples all over the world. And in one particular missionary service, two young couples heard the call of God to go into Belgium, Congo, and Africa. David Flood and his wife, Sabia, and along with them, Bertha and Joel Erickson. They packed everything, sold everything, and headed down to the Belgian Congo. And when they got there, they felt they would leave the main mission station, and with machetes and whatever they had, they would hack their way into villages. And with great zeal, ready to be martyrs, young prayer warriors. Now, Sevilla was only, David Flood's wife was only 4 feet 8 inches high. She'd been a rather famous singer in Sweden, but had this call. And David and Sevilla had a little boy, a little 2-year-old son, and he They put him on his back and they carried him, went miles into the interior of Belgian Congo, which is now Zaire. And the language was Swahili. And after weeks of hacking and pushing their way through the jungle, and in the process of making their way, they all contracted malaria. Sick and diseased, they finally came upon a village and were totally rejected. They said, we don't want any of the whites here because our gods will be offended, and pushed them out of the village. Found their way after a day or two to another village and were rejected again. Everywhere they went, nobody would have them near. So they said there's nothing else to do but settle down. They went up to a mountaintop in the jungle and hacked out an area and made some mud huts. Mr. Erickson, Joel Erickson, after about 6 months of malnutrition and pain and suffering and fever, said, I've had enough. He and his wife Bertha said, we're going back to the main mission station. And this was probably 100 miles away, and they had to hike their way back. They said goodbye to David Flood and his wife Sevilla. And David said, I can't go. Sevilla just told me she's pregnant. She had malaria. She won't be able to make the trip back to the station. And besides, I want my child born here in Africa. I've come to give my life to Africa. Sevilla for 3 months or for about 2-3 months was in a raging fever. There was nothing but malnutrition. But in the meantime, even with the burning fever, she ministered to a little boy. The only convert they had was a little boy who came from one of the local villages. Really gave his heart to Jesus. And he'd come every day with some kind of fruit and smile. And Sevilla.
You know, I remember first I just got to acknowledge when you're going and you're trying to talk to people about something and you get rejection over rejection over rejection. I mean, a lot of people quit after the first one or the first 2 or 3. It's really hard for someone to go further and further and further. I mean, I guess maybe part of it was how much they just desired to do it. The other part may have been that they were out in the middle of nowhere and they already committed so much. I know sometimes if you commit so much, it's hard not to commit it. The other thing I wanted to point out was, I'm trying to remember. Mentioned the one convert. I remember the first person I saved. I said, if I can just get one, that'll be good enough. And I remember the first person I helped lead to the Lord. And I just remember thinking, not that I've repaid my debt, but just my life was worth something. It had meaning. It was, even if I died right now, it's been fulfilled. That in itself has been enough. And so I feel like that one convert that they had, that one kid they were ministering to, and I imagine he might be a key to something else in the story, but I imagine he was the only reason why they stayed so long and had hope for so long, is that they had one. And they held on to one. If they didn't have that one, they probably would have never even set up camp. So, you know, if you're that small audience, if you're that small group of people encouraging somebody, hey, sometimes that's enough.
Her whole life was wrapped up in that one little convert. She just ministered to him. She gave birth to a little girl. And within a week, she was at the point of death. And just before Sevilla died, she whispered to David Flood, call her name Aina. A-I-N-A. And then she died. David Flood made a wooden box, and in a primitive grave on that mountain, he dug a hole and buried. But as he stood there looking at his little boy and heard the cry of the baby in a mud hut, an anger, a bitterness began to well up in David Flood's heart. He said, God, you have failed me. What a waste of life. He looked at the little casket, he put a little wooden cross. He said, she was a singer. She gave her life We've been here a year and a half, and all we have to show for it is one little boy who probably doesn't understand it anyhow. And anger rose up in his heart. He said, God, is this how you treat your servants who are ready to give their very lives? And he couldn't control his anger. It broke out into a rage. And in a rage, he took got his few belongings, took little David and little Aina into the village where they made a little hammock to carry her, and hired some of the men, and went back to the main mission station about 100 miles away, and stopped at the villages where village women would breastfeed the little girl, because it was such a novelty to see a little white girl they'd never seen before. They got to the mission station, and the Ericksons were there. They had left months before. And David said, I'm going home. I'm losing my eyesight. I lost my wife. I can't handle even my little boy, let alone a little girl. And he turned his daughter over to the Ericksons and gave her away, and headed for the shore and got on a boat back to Sweden, back to Stockholm. And all the way back to Stockholm, he stood on the deck of the boat, just seething against God. He had told going to Africa to be a martyr, to win them one by one, no matter what the cost. He'd said goodbye, and now he's coming home defeated and broken because he said, God failed me. God has not answered my prayer. God is not faithful. He's back in Stockholm and decides to go into the import business and make all the money, make a fortune, and live high.
One thing I want to point out is that we aren't entitled to anything from God. God does not have to give us anything, no matter what we do for him. I mean, like, he's already given us eternal life. We already owe everything we have to him right there. We aren't entitled to anything extra from this earth. And I can't help but feel, even myself sometimes, it's in my brain, oh, look how good I am, look how much I've been doing. I should be blessed somewhere along the lines. But really, none of it matters until the very end. And I do kind of have to feel where this guy's going, because I feel like every human, every person, part of mankind, has felt this way at one point. We got some people in the rooms. Anybody here? Anybody want to introduce themselves? They're in the backstage. Let me see. Add to stage. You there?
Hey, Jeremiah,
Hello.
how are you?
I'm doing fantasticals.
Good
Brian's
to
gotten
see
in
you.
the room.
Hey, how are you? I'm in the office now. I'm in the office. I'm off the road. But yeah, that story from David Wilkerson, right? That's a very moving story.
Yeah. We're talking about the kind of like the trials, the attack, the discouraging moments of part of being a Christian and having a ministry. And I actually, the reason why we got on this topic is because I called Steven today being like, I don't have a show. On top of that, even if I did have something I wanted to say, I don't feel like it'd mean anything coming from me. I don't feel like anything I would have to say would be worthwhile. And he said, react to this. You need to respond to this. You need to watch it. And so I was like, okay. And I threw it on. We're seeing where it lands. So that's kind of today's show. Have you seen this so far? This clip?
I'm not sure. I just joined. I'll have to watch and see.
Yeah, so pretty much where we are so far is there is this missionary who went out for a year and a half out in the jungle, only got one convert, lost his wife when she gave birth to his daughter. He couldn't take care of his daughter, so he had to give her away. And so he's mad at God right now, just to catch you up.
All right.
Yeah, I heard the story once before. I think Stephen may have shared it once before. I definitely, it's a very moving story. But
Well, this is on Proverbs, guys.
Yeah. Okay. Sorry. Okay. Yeah, I just want to say there are times, Jeremiah, when I don't know what I'm going to talk about either. And I go ahead and do my show anyway. And the Holy Spirit just makes it happen, you know? He just makes it. And so I think if you can just keep that in mind, I think that, you know, when you don't know what you're going to say or anything, sometimes just pray about it. And also, if you've got other people with you, they can help provide material.
Oh yeah, all the time. Let's get back to seeing what he's gonna say next.
I don't want to hear the name of God again. And he turned to drink alcohol, became an alcoholic, would not allow anybody to ever mention God's name in his presence. He would go into a rage. His neck would stick out, the veins, and anger. Don't talk to me about God. God is not there. He failed me. The Ericksons, within a year, were both poisoned at the mission compound by a local chief. They both died. Little Aina, and it was handed over to the Bergs. I knew the Bergs. This is a true story. In fact, I know all the characters in this story. And David and Anna Berg took her up to Masia, up into northern Congo, which is now Zaire, and for about 5 years. They called her Aggie. They changed her name to Aggie. Aggie played with these wonderful little Congo children, learned Swahili language. But then they finally decided to go on furlough because they were afraid David Flood might come back and take her. They went to America and traveled throughout around Minneapolis area. Little girl Aggie grew up just in a imaginary world because she didn't understand English. It took her a long time to adjust because she couldn't even wear shoes. She never had worn shoes. She just played bare feet in the jungle with the children. And so she was an oddity. Everybody talked about this girl had been given away and became a spectacle. So she imagined in her mind, she played games, imagination games, alone in her room. She imagined she had 4 brothers and a sister. And she would imagine her sister looking for her. And she gave names to these imaginary brothers, and she would play games and set a little table there and talk to her brothers and her sister, not knowing that David Flood had remarried Sevilla's youngest sister, which was a tragedy because she had an heart for God. But she'd given birth to 4 sons and a daughter, and she didn't know it. In imagination, she played these games. She wrote during the years trying to find her father, for years wanting to meet father. She married Dewey Hurst. And Dewey Hurst eventually became president of Northwest Assembly of God Bible School. I knew Dewey and had met Aggie, but I didn't know her story. 40 years go by. David Flood was, of course, an alcoholic, cursing God. His eyesight failing. And after 40 years of trying and struggling, the Bible school gave them both round-trip ticket to Stockholm, to Sweden. And on the way to Sweden, they had a layover for a day in London. And they decided to take a walk. They walked past Royal Albert Hall. I preached there also. I know the scene. And there was a missions convention, Pentecostal Assembly of God missions convention. And they just stood out in the lobby, and suddenly a young black preacher stood up and began to tell of what God was doing in the Belgian Congo. And her heart leaped. There was something about the man. And she said, I've got to go back. She took her husband, made her way back through the crowd. The man was standing there. And she went up to him and said, do you remember a missionary by the name of Sevilla and David Flood? He said, yes. Sevilla Flood led me to the Lord. And she said, he said, there was a little girl born, but I don't know what happened to her. She said, I'm Aggie. He took her in his hands and almost screamed. He said, do you understand? Did you hear what I said tonight? This little boy grew up to be one of the finest evangelist missionaries. 110,000 Christians in the Belgian Congo under his care, a hospital, schools, 32 schools, Bible schools. She said, your mother led me to the Lord. Of course, Sevilla was overwhelmed. Next day, they went to Stockholm. Word had got that she was coming. She had found out by now that she had brothers and a sister. She had already found that out. She got from the airport, went into the hotel lobby, and there were 3 brothers standing there. They made themselves all known to her. She said, where's David? Now, she'd pictured her brother who'd been in Africa. She pictured him as a tall, handsome man like her father. And they pointed to a chair, and there's a gray-haired man, shriveled. Said, that's David. Day 2 had become an alcoholic. This boy, 2-year-old son that David Flood had brought, he had destroyed. None of these boys, not any of them had talked to their father in years. They were angry at him. Said, you can't talk to God. He curses. They said, well, I have a sister, don't I? And she got on the phone and called her sister, and her sister, the phone went dead. And she couldn't figure it out. And then suddenly her sister came into the lobby. She says, what happened? She said, when I found your name, I dropped the phone and dressed and came. She said, all my life, I've dreamed about you. She said, I would get a world map and I have a little car and I'd pretend to drive to you. They were reunited. The daughter hated her. The other girl hated her father, David Flood, despised him. But she said, we are going to find him, and we're going there. We're going now. And they got in a car to a low caste area of Stockholm, very poor area of Stockholm, up dirty stairs into a second floor, knocked on the door. A rather rotund lady opened the door, and Aggie looked in, and there over in the corner, there were alcohol bottles there. They were empty alcohol bottles. And over in a corner, in a cot, was her father, David Flood, 73 years old, diabetes, a stroke, and cataracts on both eyes. That missionary, but an anger against God. She goes and falls at his side and says, Dad, I'm your little girl you gave away in Africa. And he turned and looked at her, and tears to flow down his cheeks. He said, I never meant to give you away. I couldn't handle it. She said, Daddy, that's okay. God took care of me. And he began to rage. He said, God didn't take care of me. God failed us. God ruined our family. All we got out of it was a little boy who didn't even understand a word of it. And then she opened up the whole story. She said, Daddy, that little boy became one of Africa's great missionaries, told the whole story. And he said, you're just telling me a story. She said, no, it's true. It's in the newspapers. It's everywhere now. Everybody knows about that boy. Tears began to flow down his eyes. And suddenly the Holy Spirit came upon David Flood. And the Lord restored him. The Lord restored David Flood.
I guess the moral of the story is that everyone is important and that everyone has something to say. Because if you look at the importance of that one little boy, he didn't know the investment they were making was going to mean anything. But they just kept going. And I think that's why the Bible says, preach about God to every living soul. the animals even. Because in doing so, who knows? Someone might overhear, it will work with somebody. Samuel, you there?
Yes, sir. Yeah, I just I felt bad never being on one of your shows.
Well, congratulations. Wait, you're gonna roast me here too?
No, you do it yourself.
Samuel, be careful now. You know, don't say anything, and don't insult Jeremiah.
Anyway,
Thanks
have
for
you
having me on.
seen have you seen this story, the one that we're currently looking at?
No, Who is it about specifically?
David. It's by David Wilkerson. It's about this missionary family that went out to the jungle. Only ended up having one convert. The man ended up going back home and was very hateful his entire life. But that one ended up changing all of Africa, practically.
Yes, I actually have heard of that. Yep.
Awesome. Then you're already caught up. We just finished that like the moment you stepped in. So, surprise. Anyway, the whole point to why we're watching this is because I ended up calling Steven and been like, I don't know if what anything I have to say even is worth it. And Steven just handed me this video and said, react to it, it's going to change you. So I watched it, and it is a very good motivational clip. I will admit that. There are tons of martyr stories that are very important, but it's kind of this one little boy, one message can change everything. Have any of you heard of Eric Liddell?
Oh, yes.
So, you have?
Yeah, definitely.
Awesome. So, for those who don't know, Eric was an Olympic athlete. He ended up going to China to be a missionary. And he's the reason why Christianity is banned in China in the first place. Because he got so many people saved that they actually started trying to suppress it immediately afterward. So he's the one who started the Christianity movement. And then China started freaking out because it was moving so fast and so abruptly that they ended up banning it shortly after, but it was too late. You can't stomp out a fire that big and persistent. So he's one of my personal favorite stories. You can find, I believe it's free on YouTube even. It's produced by Torchlighters, a anime video of Eric, like in his story. So Eric Liddell by Torchlighters.
It's pretty decent.
Anyway, that's
I've
the
seen
entire
it,
video.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
I was just advertising it with you. I've seen it so many times, and it's actually really good. So.
Oh, yeah. The animation's pretty simple and everything, but the stories are so powerful. I really enjoy them. I wanted to watch them with my wife, and my wife ends up crying at the end of every one of them. And so she doesn't want to watch them anymore. She's like, I don't want to be so sad and everything. I'm like, I find them really encouraging. Like, I look at my life, and I look at what they did, and I see their sacrifice and their battle, and that encourages me. To my wife, she just sees it as death. And I'm like, I don't get it. Anyway. But, yeah, I guess just don't lose hope. There's even the one person. You don't need to have a huge social media following. You don't have to be talking to a whole bunch of people. But that one person you convince, they might turn into something big. Or they might just get one other person. And, you may not get the glory here on this earth, but you don't need to. It's not about the glory here on this earth. And it's not about the victories here. That man didn't know that he did anything. And he was upset and angry this entire time. But for what? What did it gain him to be angry? Nothing. Instead, he messed up his family and everything else. He could have just turned around, even if he did go back to his country, and keep ministering. It reminds me kind of like David. David has had almost everything taken away from him in his life, King David. No, not King David. Sorry, wrong person. Daniel in the Lion's Den, Daniel and all the other stuff that he did. Daniel had so much happen in his life. He had so much taken away from him. He ended up being like kidnapped pretty much by like a king, and he was turned into an advisor. So he pretty much lost the ability to ever have kids, lost the ability to have a family or be a free man. He then had to serve a wicked king, and he had to do so many things under that. And he never had the ability to be his own person. And he was rewarded at times for it, but then everything would be turned up on its head again. Joseph is the same story. Here's a guy who was faithful and was thrown in jail, was faithful still, and then thrown back in jail, and it just kept happening to him.
Yeah, those are such inspiring stories, because these are people that just went through such horrible times, persecuted and treated so unfairly, but yet they persevered and they kept the faith and they continued to obey the Lord, and eventually they were rewarded. Can you imagine Joseph going from being sold into slavery to being second in command in Egypt? And his brothers that sold him into slavery had to come and beg at his feet. That's an amazing story. Amazing. But I'm in my car now, so I'll mute unless I have to speak, because there might be road noises and stuff.
Yeah. But I guess the main point I'm getting at is, you never know when you're going to be rewarded in this life, if ever. And that's the thing, is sometimes you don't get rewarded in this life. Now, the Bible's very clear that they got rewarded in this life, but I think that part of that could have been just to go and try to get the story understood. Hey, serve me, you will get taken care of, you will get rewarded. Maybe not here, though. Maybe never here. But I'll tell you this. My father has a bigger pocket than anybody else. He has a bigger wallet than anybody else. So I'm not too worried about whether or not he's going to be able to afford it. Anyways, that's more or less the gist of it. I got a whole bunch of other stuff I have to run to, and I hate that I started this one late, but it doesn't mean I can add more stuff to it. Achilles, you joined too late.
Hey.
Like, I'm hovering over the end stream button.
I came to stop you.
I came in earlier to stop him, brother. I don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah. Jeremiah, you've barely been over half an hour, buddy.
I know, but like, I said everything I need to say. It was a great message. Like, I'm not going to be one of those extra wordy people just to be an extra wordy person.
Yeah, but if you can repeat them for us, it will be 1 hour or so.
Good to know that it's recorded and you can watch it whenever you want.
Now that you should. I'm sorry for being late. I was out of home. I've had problems with my baby doggy.
Oh.
And I've been in the ER for 5-6 hours.
Oh.
He's doing a little better, but he's gonna stay in. So I just got back. I checked what's going on, and I see a stream. I'm like, oh, there was a stream going on.
Yeah.
I was stuck in traffic for about 4 hours today. So.
I'm sorry, what?
I was stuck in traffic for about 4 hours today.
Good grief, what happened?
Well, I went all the way to work and back. And then I found out that I actually didn't do half my job. And I got called by management. I was like, oh, crap, how on earth did I miss all of this? So they didn't tell me to, but I had to, just because I like to leave my space looking good and clean. I had to go all the way back out. And so it's a long drive. And on the way back, there was a traffic jam. So 4 hours of being on the road, It's tired.
And I don't understand.
Oh, wow.
I don't understand why they call it traffic when nobody's moving. Can you just?
Well, we were moving.
Yeah. Well, why do they?
At least 1 mile an hour.
Hey, Achilles, why do they call it rush hour when no one is able to rush?
Right.
Well, they're all rushing. They're just pushing into each other.
The word in Greek for traffic is movement.
Well, I'm going to hit the end button
We call it movement. Why do we call it movement? I do not understand. Nobody's going anywhere. We're all stuck. No, don't press the button.
Yep.
No, terrorist alert.
Oh, wait,
He's
wait,
got
wait.
the power. He's got.
My finger
I have to hit
is
it
on
again.
the button.
Okay, hold on. I'm gonna move this over and